And here we go again with the Kings of Chaos podcast. And before I introduce my co host, first I want to talk about what preceded him, which is his sweater. I thought when we did the first episode, we said we didn't want to be Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, but cardigans, depending on the style of cardigan,
Hmm.
Kurt Cobain, right? Very rock stylish, very grunge-like, very boho chic. So that's why I like the cardigan, depending on how you wear it.
Kurt Cobain's dead. So is grunge.
It's Mr. Rogers.
All right, but I do like the cardigan. It's a very
Yeah.
nice color.
Well,
I
thank
like
you.
the gray and the pink together.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
it's a nice
Appreciate it.
look. So you're Al.
You're Adam.
I'm Adam. We are the Kings of Chaos podcast. And today we are going to be talking about dating woes for average Joes before we get too deep into this topic,
Yes.
which is about men seemingly giving up on dating in this day and age. I wanted to talk about something quickly. I would say most women would think that that's not true. I mean, if you look at social media, and I guess this is part of some of the reasons why men aren't dating anymore, a lot of women have full inboxes, right? For men trying to hit on them. Sometimes men aren't trying to hit on them, but they just assume every man is trying to hit on them.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a friend from like 20 years ago, but literally because of social media, every woman thinks that every man is hitting on them.
Yep.
And women just seem to assume the same thing happens for men. So you can tell me, does the same thing happen for men?
Hell no.
No.
No, I can tell you it's interesting. So I'm going to talk about from a social media perspective
Yeah.
from the art world.
Yeah.
Okay. When other artists reach out, there's one of two things. Either people reaching out because they like the work,
Yeah.
or it's people reaching out because they're trying to some scam or the NFT bullshit.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck off and leave me alone.
Yeah.
I can tell you, because I've seen it firsthand, that with women, if you're attractive,
Mhm.
even if you are not trying to overtly put yourself out there, but if you're attractive, and even if you're standing with a painting, conservatively dressed, they see a beautiful woman, and I've heard it firsthand.
Well, men will
Yep.
hit on anything.
Exactly.
We can agree. Most men will hit on anything. We are not most men, but I will say most
Most
men will
men.
hit on anything.
Yeah.
But let's go to this story, and I love this story.
Okay.
So when we first started podcasting,
Yeah.
I was online and I saw someone come across my feed on Facebook, and I clicked and I saw her platform, and I was really interested in what she did. And I messaged her. It took her a while to message me back because I would be skeptical if I was a woman as well. And
Yep.
she did message me back about a month later. Funny thing is, at the same time as you had met her on a dating app,
Okay.
right?
You will have to, not during the show, we're not going to name any names.
No, we're not going to
I was
name
gonna
names.
say-
I'm just using it as a story, but it's an
I was
interesting
gonna say,
story.
I'm trying to think who
right?
it was because we seem to have met a lot of people in connection shortly.
No, we
Yeah.
have. I'm just using it as a story though, but it's
Yeah.
just like you can meet people in different ways. But it's funny, it's like you were meeting someone on a dating app because you were both looking for someone to date. Whereas I on Facebook am not one of those men that typically is going to scour for women, but
Right.
out of interest, I just saw what she did and I really liked the platform. So I reached out from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
But it's still, if I would say, if I were a woman, I were getting that many men reaching out to me, especially if I had a platform,
Oh, yeah.
right? Then I would be skeptical. So I just found that very interesting. But I wanted to touch on this whole idea of like, and I guess this is where women don't understand, but it was explained to me really well in another podcast. You've seen this podcast before. It's usually the one guy and he's against like 10 other women sitting across the table from him.
Okay.
And they all tend to be like OnlyFans, like they all have OnlyFans pages. And then he brings in this other guy with a beard and they kind of like, have conversations. And it's like these two guys against all these women. I touched on one the other day though, and it's like they explained something. They explained it so well, and it really suits this situation. And what they said is, what people don't understand is, men are salesmen,
Right.
women are marketers, right? So to put that in context, okay, men are the ones who have to do the approaching,
Yep.
right? And historically, it's been that way. Chivalry, we've talked about this already,
Yeah.
but men have to do the approaching. Women do the marketing, means they're the ones who have to put themselves out there, right, for the men to approach. So women aren't that overt, right? And this probably goes back to our last episode, or a couple episodes back, where we were talking about, men picking up on cues,
Cues and
right?
flirting and things like that.
Yeah. But what's really interesting about it is when you look at it in that perspective, it says, yeah, it's like what women don't understand is even just posting a picture of themselves in bikini, If you understood men better, it's like men see that, and it's almost like, and it shouldn't be, but it's like, it's you see an attractive woman, it's almost like, okay, well, I'm gonna try to see.
Yep.
I'm single. It
Yep.
says she's single. Meanwhile, most women never put their dating or marriage status online,
Oh,
right? Men might, but most women do not.
no.
So, and it gets interesting because men see that and say, okay, so it's like you're single, so I'm gonna try to reach out to you. But because women are marketers that way, um, they do get a lot more in their inbox, but they seem to think men get the same thing. And it's not even close to the case. And
No.
as we start to go through this topic here, you can almost see, like in this day and age, almost how bleak it is for a certain segment of men trying to go out there and date. And, especially as men get older, trying to date gets even harder. We're going
Harder.
to talk about younger men, but
Yep.
if you think about older men even trying to date and men that have seen it all and done it all, like you can understand why those men specifically would just want to give up. It's like, this is just too hard. I don't want to do it. But it's totally different for the younger men who are just trying to get out. They haven't even had those experiences yet, but they're just ready to throw in the towel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you researched a whole bunch of stats. So this was a 2022 study.
Yeah, but
Okay.
you're talking about the Pew
The
Institute?
Pew
Yeah.
Institute, right?
So can I just give a bit of background about that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so the Pew Institute, it's a non-partisan, not-for-profit organization, research kind of think tank out of the United
Yeah.
States. And they do studies to take a look at wellness trends, things that are going on, okay, in terms of society, social elements. And so this was a study conducted of all ages, about 6,000 people. So a fairly decent-sized study back in 2022. And the focus was on people's interest in dating and relationships. And my mind was blown away when I saw the initial stats. So they broke it down into different age groups. I think it was 18 to 29. I think it was 30 to 49, 50 to I think maybe 69, and then 70 and up, something like that. Okay. And the 18 to 29-year-olds, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was that 61% of males,
63.
oh, 63, okay, so 63% of males were not interested in a relationship of any form. And a relationship can mean dating multiple people. It
And
can mean
that was
exclusivity.
double the number of women
Yeah, I
that
was going
were
to say
interested
women were like
in a
about
relationship.
30,
34%,
34%, right?
Yeah.
And that's mind-boggling when you think about this because, I mean, that is prime time to be getting out there and meeting people and dating. And I was blown away by that.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely blown away by
I
that.
think furthermore, it says, and I think this is in general, all men, all single men. It says only 50% of single men were looking for a form of relationship, which means the rest of them are just looking to hook up.
To hook up or nothing at all.
Right?
Whereas, and I think women was 61% are looking for,
61%
right?
3 years earlier. No, it wasn't women, it was men. It went down like
Oh, it went down. That's right.
11%.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Where it's funny though, at one point I had seen a study that said that it's men nowadays are more interested in marriage than women. It's like that flipped. Right? So sometimes there's conflicting studies that you might see. I mean, this helps us obviously for what we're doing right now, but it
Absolutely.
depends. Like there might be conflicting studies out there.
Yeah. What's also interesting is marriage is one form of a committed relationship, and one day I would love to do an episode
Having
on
a dog is a
marriage.
committed relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think marriage itself is a real interesting topic to
Especially
kind
for
of
this day and age.
to unfold and unpack at some point. But going back to this, it might be, I would love to know in that same study if they took a look at what percentage of men still want committed relationships.
So they do have that number here. It
No, but
says-
going back to the study that you're talking about, if that percentage of men,
Yeah.
a lot of men who, that the percentage who do want committed, they want marriage or
Yeah,
nothing.
but I
That's what I'd be
imagine how
curious.
much it went up by how much it flipped by, right?
Exactly.
Keep in mind too, it's like it's how we're brought up. They always make this joke online, like men aren't prepared for marriage. Like even if you look at the toys that boys have versus what women have.
Yeah.
Boys have He-Man, right? He-Man's not learning how to date Skeletor, right? They're fighting against each other. Women, though, had Barbie and Ken.
Yeah.
Women, and keep in mind, this has changed in society over the years for
Yeah.
sure. But if you go back past generations, the toys that they used to give to boys and girls are very different.
Yeah.
And in the past, it almost looked, it's like you were grooming young girls for marriage, right? Or you had movies that were grooming young girls for marriage. Boys didn't have that. So it's by the time they got into marriage, men had no clue, how to be in those types of like a marriage relationship, whereas women were more well prepared for it because it's almost like it was a dream of theirs their whole lives. Whereas boys is like they hit a certain age, like, oh, now I have to pair off with somebody,
Yeah.
right? So it's very different. Your stat here, though, was 41% of women are still looking for committed relationships. And this is from 3 years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
two
Okay.
years ago. Only 25% of men now are looking for an exclusive relationship.
Yeah.
I have a bit more insight than you might on this just because well, you do have nieces and nephews, but
Yeah.
I know I have three nephews, early 20s. Okay, so and I've gotten stories from my brothers of just like them and their friends and how they view even dating. It's like you might ask, like we used to get asked, like, "Hey, do you have a girlfriend?" Right? And they're more like, "We don't do that anymore." Like, there's a hookup culture.
Yeah.
It's very different. Even I remember, for me being younger, on a Saturday night, I'd be hanging out with my friends. We might be watching a hockey game or playing some video games. I would want to go to a bar because I wanted to meet girls. Sometimes it was hard to get the rest of them to go out and do that, right? So you just see how much that's changed too. It's like now
Yeah.
more of the guys would rather stay home
Oh yeah.
because like I don't want to get bothered with that. And it's like less of the guys, but it used to be more guys would want to go out, right? And a couple of them would want to stay behind, but that's flipped.
Oh, it's flipped. And like you
Yeah.
say, whether it's staying home and watch the hockey game, staying home playing video games, staying
Yeah.
home and doing whatever.
Staying
But
home playing video games, you're not even around anybody else,
Yeah.
right? You're just playing them online.
you got it.
Right? So, I mean, I find that quite interesting. So, we have to kind of get into, I guess, why the decline over the years. I mean, that's seeing it, but like, how did it start?
Look, I'm not putting all of it back on the last 5 years, but
Pandemic.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the pandemic has played a role in that.
Okay.
And so again, there's been additional studies that have been done.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even you don't even need studies. All you have to do is talk to anyone who has kids in school, be
Yeah.
it let's say high school or university,
Yeah.
college, whatever it happens to be. But when the schools were shut down for a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
socialization's already tough enough because everything's about technology.
Mhm.
Some of those, it's almost like a lost art communication. So when you and I grew up, it was about, hey, how do you meet people? How do you connect? How do you talk? How do you make
Everything
organic?
was being out of the house and meeting people.
Exactly.
Right? Or being exposed to so many people. Like you could just show up at someone's house after school and meet people.
Exactly.
Spin the bottle.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. Now, literally, you think about it, schooling online, banking online, shopping online, dating online. If you choose to swipe, 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 and everything's social media and all these falsehoods that go along with social media. And again, it's not that I'm critiquing all this because I'm on social media. We're on social media for the podcast. I'm on again for other reasons as well.
Course.
But there's how
There's
are you
good and
using
bad
it?
for everything. But yeah.
Absolutely. But with schools being shut down and that, students, whether it's like, I'll say youth, young adults, being at home more,
Mm-hmm.
that opportunity to socialize was lost to some extent,
It's a big part of it.
right? So it fed into more of this culture of TV, apps, the video games,
The
so on and so forth.
academic data, the academic version that we have in front of us is presenting that for sure.
Right?
Right. So that's one big issue, like social issues because brought on by the pandemic, but also changes in society and digital devices. And it's affecting adults too. But yeah.
For sure. And with that, though, it's interesting because in the study and what they talk about, and I think you might have which study that came from there, I think, but I'm not sure if it's the
Okay,
okay.
I'll list off
That's
the
the
studies
studies after,
later.
okay.
When
But-
we post this on YouTube, I'm going to have it.
Perfect.
I think it's a Psychology Today
Article?
Article. Yeah.
Okay. But what's interesting that came from there is they talked about how it was a great time of reflection for people and a lot of women during that time. And again, this is based on heterosexual relationships. I think it's important to state that. So again, this is what it's talking about right now. I can't talk in other contexts. But women really use that opportunity to reflect and like, okay, what's really important to me?
Okay.
And I think this is just the trend we're seeing in society in general. So this is kind of my career, academic.
Yeah. More women will graduate university than men will. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And we're seeing again, which is great in terms of more women, high powered positions, the ambition, the drive. And hey, more
Yeah.
power to them. I think that's
A
fantastic.
relationship not as important, having children not as important, having a family not as important.
Yep.
Where am I going to find a house? Can I afford a house? Am I going to be living with 16 of my friends? Yeah.
Yep. And as they're focusing on that with a level of maturity that goes with that, in the meantime, the guys are still hanging around playing video
Yeah.
games and going back to just
Or all
hanging
these
out at
kids are
home.
going to
And
be living with their parents till they're 40. So like, where are they going to find a place to actually hook up? But yeah.
exactly. I think that's really impacted things. And so I think that is playing a role
Okay.
in things right now. I think that's playing a huge role.
That's a big role. You touched on the internet and social media, but you kind of missed a big glaring one, especially for young men.
I know where you're going with it. Okay. So,
Forget young men, just men.
men.
But there's women who watch this too. Like,
Okay. I'm gonna quote the stats, and you can correct me on that. I'm gonna quote the stats, okay? But then I want to again qualify it. So the big issue that I know that you're talking about is porn, okay? And they talk about it was a study done based on Australia, the UK, and the United States, if I remember correctly,
Italy.
and Italy. Okay,
Italy, where they pinch your bum. Yeah.
there you go. And it was something like 78 to 87% of
Oh, so
males.
close. 76 to 87.
Seven, okay.
Yes.
But a very high percentage
Very
of
high
males
percentage. They
watch.
said of 18 to
29.
29-year-old men are consuming porn regularly.
Now, this is where I want to qualify. A, it didn't get into what regularly means. Okay. B, and I hate when terms are thrown around for everything and people label everything. I am not suggesting this implies porn addiction. Okay. I think that's really important. But if this is the go-to for this age group right now and their needs are being met through that, that's impacting relationships as
It's
well.
a skewed view of intimacy for
Yes,
sure for young
absolutely.
adults. I said people that grew up in our generation will see it and they look at it very differently than the kids do.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because if you go back to our childhood, it's like, every boy had a Playboy under his mattress, or Penthouse, which was worse than Playboy, or Hustler, which was worse than Penthouse, or there's variety. You go to any convenience store, and when we were kids, they didn't even have it behind plastic. You could actually see everything
Right.
when you walked into the store. But I think pornography is very, very different.
It's so much more accessible in this day
It's
and age.
accessible, but it's almost like you're watching a soap opera. But in their minds, it's like that's how they've learned about intimacy and sex. So yeah, I could see how that would skew their view of it. So in their minds too, it's like they're looking for that quick hit of dopamine, but they're not looking for anything beyond that.
And we have talked about how social media presents sometimes the fairy tale relationship ideology that women sometimes see. And men kind of view relationships through this lens of porn. And so when you go back to, again, these declining stats, it plays another key role. But the problem with that is
changing their brains too.
It's changing their brains. It's stunting their, not only their intellectual, but their emotional development. It's stunting that level of maturity. And we know that guys, as it is, mature slower than women. And that's proven.
I want to touch on that point because you also bring up a good point. So the porn's a very good point for it, but keep this one in mind too. It's like, what do they say? They like women hit the high point of their value. And keep in mind, this is not my views. It's just this is things that I've watched or read recently.
Yeah.
Women hit the high point of their value when they're relatively young, up until they're 30. And, if you look at Hollywood too, you have a lot of actresses say, yeah, like I had the highest value up until I was 30. And then as I got older, then I'm playing the mom roles or whatever. Okay. So just on that alone, it just tells you how society views women, right? Right or wrong. I'm just saying that's just one, that's view of the lens. Okay. Whereas men, when they're young, are still trying to find their way and prove themselves. And they're not really a value until they hit 30, 35, right?
Older.
So, and you keep in mind this in many ways back in the day, why women were dating older men, right? And looking for that to settle down. So I just find that interesting as well. So, but now in this day and age, it's taking longer even for these men, because if you look at, the economy and things like that, and just housing, especially where we live, right? You live in a big metropolitan city. We're the fourth largest city in North America. Most of them won't be able to afford a house.
No.
Most, unless a parent passes on and leaves them a large chunk of their wealth. um, right? They're going to be living with friends probably, or with a lot of roommates and things like that. So it gets harder and harder for them
Yeah.
to have value to women, and obviously there will be a certain set of men that, like 20% or higher, that will be able to do that. So maybe that makes them more valuable. So that leaves the other men in the dust when it comes to dating. So that must make it harder for them as well. There was one more thing on this academic list,
Okay.
which is there's a smaller dating pool of women, where we'll get into in a moment,
Okay.
because it's 50-50 if you think, but we'll look into the stats and see where that comes out, right? But now they're more discerning. So as I was just
Yeah.
saying, more discerning. So they don't want to date a lot of these men because their views of men have changed over time, right? So there's more competition for young men, okay? And the other thing is too, with the immaturity that comes along with that too, as we were saying, even issues with the pandemic and not reading social cues and all that, right? They don't deal as well with rejection.
Yeah.
Um, they lack the experience as well for dating. Um, Number one, because there's not enough women to date, but also because they're not trying to date. So when it comes time where they do have to pair off and date someone, like they have no clue what they're doing.
No. And when you talk about the competition for women,
Yeah.
it's multi-level. One is if more women percentage-wise are in committed relationships than men, so that obviously reduces the numbers right there,
Yeah.
right? The second thing is, and you talked about this, be it inboxes or I'll even go back to dating apps, for example.
Yeah.
I've never heard any guy go, man, my inbox is flooded with messages from women.
No, but women assume that men do. And I've had
Right.
this conversation
Right.
with women who would assume that, and I'm going to say they said this, not me. I'm like, you're relatively attractive, you're funny, or this, the way you post, podcasts. You think all these things would attract women? It's like, but again, women are marketers. They're not going to knock you over the head and say, "Hey, I want to date
They,
you."
they, they still want to be chased.
Yeah,
And again, that's not a criticism saying
no,
this, they still want
but
to be
that it
chased.
still works that way. So even
Absolutely.
online, there are more men chasing women than women would be chasing men.
So I have friends who've said, you know what, it's ridiculous how many messages are, I can't even get through all this, right? It doesn't mean it's all quality men, but the reality is, but that can be exhausting. Think about
But
that.
it's not even that, just men saying, "Hey, I noticed that you like to do this." And it's just their sly way of getting in. And like you and I can see it a mile away because we are
Absolutely.
men, whereas the women will tell me the stories. I'm like, that's him hitting on you. She's like, I don't get that. I'm like, okay, because I'm a man.
Yeah.
I mean, women have said the reverse to me too. You don't understand women, but I typically do. If there's a situation where a woman's contacted me and it's rare for that to happen, I'm like, huh. Whereas for them, they're getting contacted by so many men,
Yeah.
right? I would more assume that most of them are trying to hit on them. Whereas a woman reaches out to me, I'm just going to assume that she's just reaching out for other business or this or that,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's very interesting. So we gave your academic version of this.
No.
Um, and even with that, it gave kind of suggestions for how to fix this. Like, how do we change this, right? So what are the strategies to change male attitudes? They gave three, which, I'm going to flip on its head after we give them, but
Of course you are.
it's who I am. They said less technology and more social interaction. So, I mean, you've touched on that.
And but it's key again. It's like anything else. How do you learn? How do you grow? You get out and do.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to learn to ride a bike purely by watching videos on it.
Yeah.
You got to get out there. You got to learn how do you balance and how do you change gears and everything else. I'm not saying you can't understand the basics behind it, but you got to get out there and do it. It's no different than with dating. You can't learn to date. You can't be a better
You
dater.
can
You can't.
read about it and learn.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So
Right?
it's biological, right? Yeah.
And even if you were to read about it, and we've talked about, wow, one of our first episodes when we talked about getting your ex back, and there's sites out there as well, like how to date, how to this, how to that. But again, a lot of things are clickbait. A lot of things out there are, it's about money
You can
making.
explain to someone how to try to do it and they might be successful at it to a point, but it's never going to be natural. It's going to fail miserably.
It has to. Look,
And that's why the next one that
I
you
was going to
touched
say,
on,
yeah. Look, we do this show.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've only half jokingly said we almost should be like the modern day Hitch, where we kind of help guys. So, who
It's easy to
might
see
like
when it's not you. You can easily help someone else, right?
But the thing is, you and I can also be bigger personalities in a room sometimes. And someone who's quieter, what works for us
But
might not
your
work.
hair precedes you. My ego does, but your hair, yeah.
But what works for us, and I'm not talking about dating, I'm just talking about interacting and meeting people and so on and so forth. That is a practice skill. Like I was out at an event, and aside from my friend who took me to the event to kind of meet some incredible people in the music industry, I didn't know anyone at the event. I felt super comfortable.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done that years ago.
No, me either.
That's a growth experience. But what I'm saying is if someone's not ready for that, we can teach them how to do that. But if you're not ready, you're not ready. But the only way to start getting ready
is to
to
put
get out of
yourself in those
you got to
situations.
get out of the house.
Yeah, it's a clip that I posted that we're all risk takers. You don't realize it, and that's just that itself that's a social risk.
Yeah.
You have to take those social risks and make mistakes and fail to get better at it.
And I don't see it as fail. I just see it as another lesson learned.
No, but I mean here, this is number 2 on this list, which kind of bothers me. And everyone needs a coach these days. You need coaches and practitioners, is what they're saying, to help males change their attitudes. Like, when, in your Hitch comment, when did our society become that? It's like back in the day, you had a young male, he was kind of failing, didn't understand things. A big brother, free, right? You had a grandparent or a dad or something that would help you, right? Again, or an older brother that would help you.
No.
It's kind of sad that we've gotten to that point where we're suggesting to young males that they need a coach to help them learn to be social. But again, I do understand from, having taught young students, you obviously, even younger students, there's a lot of anxiety.
There's a lot of anxiety around everything. And it's interesting because you talk about having male role models, and depending on generation, I think about my dad. Some of my dad's advice was phenomenal. Some of it, and looking back, I don't remember all of it. But again, it may have been what was good.
Generation too.
Yeah, different generation, and it was great for his time. But again, you look at the period of time.
Going to dating app just to look and like see his eyes pop out.
Right.
Of his head.
I don't know if my mom would appreciate it.
No, maybe they should do it together.
Hey, there you go.
Date night.
Swinging singles over 60.
Just for entertainment.
Exactly. Mom and dad don't watch this episode.
But I mean, yeah.
But no, but I was going to say, and it's not that everyone necessarily needs a coach, but it's the other thing is though, just because someone is older doesn't make them a great role model either, because wiser. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of males out there who don't know their own
but
shit.
But again, you could take advice from your parents. They've been together 55 years. I could have taken advice from my grandparents, right? Because married 50 years. But again, different time.
Exactly.
So you take anything with a grain of salt. But more days now, you'd be looking, if you wanted a mentor, like find a guy who's been married for like 20 years and still like looks at his wife the same way he did the day he married her. I'll model that by all means, right?
Yeah.
The last one on here was address the avoidance rejection fears, which we've already kind of talked about with the whole coaching things, right? But I think those two go together.
And even that, I'm not, I don't think coaching or therapy or whatever practitioner, and again, I'm in that field, right?
Yeah.
As a coach, so again, want to clarify
you are
that,
a real coach.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I do discuss relationships and everything else as part of that, but it's, the idea of rejection and avoidance, it's not that you necessarily need to speak to a practitioner about that, but there's such a great fear with everybody around everything these days. And the only way to address those fears is to tackle it head on. And you can tackle things gradually. So
there's nothing wrong with guidance. I think guidance is a great thing, but people also have to, take responsibility for themselves. And even before they go to those, meetings with their coach, they have to do a little bit of research on their own and have the right questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, if it's too much, look, it can be intimidating going up to a random woman in the proper circumstances.
Especially nowadays, yes.
Right? But again, there's ways of doing it, okay? There's definitely ways of doing that. So if you're not sure, and I'm not a proponent, and I'm not suggesting dating apps are the only way to go, but being behind a screen, which in this day and age, and the age group we're talking about, which is their comfort level, so go on an app and start a talk that way. And just use it to meet someone and then progress to a phone and then go out, but get over the frickin' fear.
Some of these universities are virtual now. Like they don't even get to sit in the classroom with kids their own age
absolutely.
Anymore. So it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So
but you know what? That's a great point too, because if that's the case, like I think back, right? Where did you meet people? Well, I originally met people through school.
Yeah.
right? And then you go out. I remember
through
going out and
school, but social interactions after school. I'm talking high school,
yeah, yeah.
right? You
But
got to lift home from a friend,
friend,
come in,
yeah,
hang out. Yeah.
university, right? And then even from there, I remember,
It was back in
clubbing,
the day
club.
too when your parents were still out. Nowadays, it's like the parents are still picking their kids up from high school. They don't even get a chance to do that because each kid gets picked up individually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So coddled children also created a problem
Oh,
too.
that's a whole other issue.
Okay. But here, we did the academic
Yeah,
version. So that you wrote out that part,
yeah.
right? You did a very good job with it. Um, you knew I was going to flip that on its head.
Mm-hmm.
So you gave the reasons for the decline. I give the real reasons why men aren't dating and are fucking fed up. Okay. So this is, I just found an article on this. It says 20 brutally honest reasons why men don't want to date anymore. And I mean, it still touches on a lot of what you've already touched on. It just adds to it in a
Okay.
way where it's just like it gives it more context that it didn't have before.
Okay.
And it's a long list. I'm going to go through it very quickly of all the reasons, and you're going to notice some of the reasons were already on there. But you touch on the ones, wait till I'm done, and then touch on the ones that you really want to touch on quickly. Okay, so reason number one, high financial costs of marriage, dating, all that. Okay. Fear of commitment, non-committal.
Mhm.
Okay. Negative past experiences. Okay. Pressure to prioritize career over love life. You said that about women.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They can't find anyone compatible. Okay. Men outnumber women online.
Mm-hmm.
Social media influences. We talked about that, include porn in that. Desire for freedom. Okay. But that's also worrying about your career, hanging out with your friends, being on your own and learning about yourself. Okay. Lack of trust in the opposite sex.
Okay.
Unrealistic expectations. This is both men and women. Okay. We talked about the hookup culture.
Yep.
Okay. Mental health concerns we just hit on. Anxiety ridden, can't handle rejection as an example. Dating apps and dating culture.
Mm-hmm.
Legal and financial risks of dating for men now after the Me Too movement.
Yeah. I'm making faces on that one, but
You can make faces on that one, but I've seen articles on it. It's an interesting thing to research and look up.
yep.
Okay. Because it did change certain things in society and the way men were looked at in general. It became a little more difficult for them to approach women. Okay. Again, these are from different, like
Yeah.
this
No,
is,
I
I'll
get it.
post this article. You can look at it.
Yeah.
I'll find other ones so we can see,
Yeah.
the difference. Societal expectations. And by that, they meant insert groom here,
Yeah.
right? It's like they're expected to hit a certain age, get married, but some men may never be ready for marriage. Or, as you said, we're going to talk about marriage another time. Is marriage what people are looking for
Well,
nowadays?
and I know you want to get through the list, but
Yeah.
for some reason, it seems to be this idea that commitment is synonymous with marriage. When the hell did that ever be the case? You can't, because every marriage, and I've talked about this, is so bloody successful.
Oh, why was marriage important back in the day? Because it
Exactly.
was a trait, right? It's like, especially feudal times. Like,
Yeah.
I'm giving you my daughter to help your family,
Yeah.
right? Keep in mind, these aren't my views, but I'm giving you my daughter, and so you're giving me something in return. It's a monetary exchange.
Yep.
Like, I'm giving you my daughter, right? In this exchange, okay? Still happens in certain countries, right?
Yep.
It wasn't a choice. You have people betrothed and all that.
Yep.
But in a lot of ways, that's marriage was a transaction.
Oh yeah.
And she was going off and like she was leaving her family to go start a different family with someone else and basically leaving, like gone.
Yeah.
Right. And she was an asset to them on the farm too, when you look at it that way. Most people forget about that
Yeah.
when they're thinking of marriage. It's
Oh, yeah.
like all the romance and all that. Like back then they were a lot more practical in certain ways, right? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that,
Yep.
right? Again, history minor. So social expectations, insert groom here. They're not cool with that. Personal development goals. Again, they want to find themselves. The complexity of modern relationships. Okay. We'll probably touch on this again. The more and more women being in their masculine side because they can't leave it at the office in some ways, they're saying.
Yeah.
Or because when they're raising kids, they're in a mode. They can't be in their feminine side as much as they used to. Because it's rush, 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 go, go, go. It's like always organizing things. And men can't necessarily be in their masculine anymore because they're not offset by feminine energy.
Yep.
Right. So
Yep.
it's constant. nowadays for a lot of women. So that's been researched and looked at as well as an issue recently. Um, Fear of losing autonomy. Okay.
No.
And as we said again, changing attitudes towards marriage. It's a long list.
Okay. So each of these I would love to explore in depth at some point. So hang on to that list.
Okay.
I do see some overlap.
Do not go into in depth on this. We'll be here for 3 hours.
No.
But yeah.
And I do see some overlap there.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, for example, a fear of commitment, which I think was in there, and sense of autonomy,
Yeah.
to me, those are more or less, it's like a double-sided coin.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah. And when you take a look, and I don't want to delve into attachment theory because it's too easy to generalize things again. But if you take a look at how secure attachment style is decreasing, we're seeing the insecure styles an increase in that.
It's an interesting way to approach this. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
When you look at that, and then when you look at men,
Yeah.
again, it's not all men, but when you look at avoidance, men often might be
More men
of
would
an
be avoidant, yes.
right? So that speaks to the whole fear of commitment, the whole trying to maintain their autonomy. If you go back as well to things such as, this 18 to 29 gap that we were talking about, and boys will be boys, and just all this fun they're having with freedom and this and that. Why do you want to give that up necessarily?
It's Peter Pan syndrome. I want to be a playboy. Yeah.
Exactly. You talked about past experiences in there. So trauma, negative previous experiences.
Oh, your first girlfriend cheated on you. You'll never see relationships again.
Okay,
Yeah.
but the reality is everyone has had heartbreak at some point in time.
But when you're anxiety ridden.
But how much of it's anxiety? We use these terms for everything nowadays. The reality is being nervous is not the same as being anxious.
No, but when I talk anxious, they're medicated and like they have huge fear of social interactions where they can't leave the house.
Right. So, but again, now you're talking agoraphobia, and that's a small percentage.
It's a small percentage,
right?
But there's just fear of just any social interaction because it's like they haven't been exposed to it that much.
But again, it goes back to
you have kids that don't even want to go to a restaurant for dinner. When I was a kid, I'd love to go to a restaurant for dinner, and you have kids that just they're not exposed to it enough, and even the parents force them to do it. They just don't want to do it.
No, but that's where it's. Again, we can look to blame past traumas like everything, but there's also this sense out there, if we want to use that, of this victim mentality with everything as well.
Well, that's a big part of society now too.
Right. And you know what?
Sort your own shit out, sort out your own patterns, realize you're part of the issue, and it's not always someone inflicting something on you. Sometimes it's your choices.
Yeah, the world is not against you. And yeah, I've seen that throughout different periods of time, but you see it more than ever now. And it's like, get over your fucking self.
Hey, but there are certain things working against men. So let's touch on those because I found some unofficial reasons that weren't in either of those lists, mine or yours.
Okay.
So one of them's touched on, said the unreasonable expectations of women. But what does that really mean? Okay. So I've been on a bunch of sites where constantly it's this argument of, okay, you have a generation raised a certain way to view themselves of, we're all beautiful, we're all this. But what the issue becomes is when we've given everyone ribbons for participation and things like that, there's no competition for them. Everyone grows up a certain way thinking that we're all perfect, right? Is that the case though, right? And again, not my views. I'm getting this off of other things that I'm watching in sites.
But I remember that in the education system.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I always thought it was bullshit. I'm like, so.
But here it comes to roost.
Oh, absolutely.
Is what the issue
But the thing is, here's the thing. If I'm praising you all the time for every little thing, eventually praise is meaningless, right? And it goes back to, this is the point I was thinking about earlier, it goes back to as well that when we talk about past pain, how do you experience joy? Through pain. If everything in the life, I take a look.
Life is pain,
right? If everything was easy and simple and beautiful, we get bored of that and be looking for new highs. But
it's an inflated view of every person, and it could stem back to that. We didn't study it, so I'm not going to say that, but it could. But the reality is, and I did find quick stats online. Okay, a lot of women seem to think they are a 10 out of 10. Okay. And even when you see they're sitting next to someone and someone else, and it's like, but in everything, they just see themselves as a 10, right? Positive view of yourself, nothing wrong with that until it comes to this, okay? The view back in the day is that if a woman was a 6, she was okay to pair off with a man who was a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But now you have more women, and keep this in mind. This goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. When you have all these men hitting on all these women all the time online, you would get an inflated ego too. So you think that, you are perfect, right? In these men's eyes, and you can have any men at any time. So you're going to look for the cream of the crop all the time. So all these other men that used to be able to pair off with other women, similar, it's called value, they can't do that
But
anymore.
in some ways, I think guys are partially to blame for that.
How?
Okay, so one of my friends, she told me about this guy who she knows. Okay, he would be on the apps. He wasn't discerning at all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
So
that would cause
a female, every female he would swipe right just to see who he'd connect with.
Yeah. It's a numbers game to him. Yeah.
Right. So when you're playing
never read a thing in her profile.
Right. Yeah. When you're swiping on every single person, if enough guys are doing that, what message are you sending to people? So to some extent, I understand in terms of fine, these women who, and again, I want to be clear. There's no one out there who's a 10 out of 10. I'm sorry. There's no one out there who's a 10 out of It might be that, no, let me reframe what I was going to say.
Oh, Derek, 1980s.
What I was going to say is...
Heather Thomas. Yeah, okay.
No, what I was going to say is, hopefully the person who someone partners up with, they see as close to being a 10. Yeah. They're not perfect, but maybe perfect for them or whatever quirks and everything else they find endearing.
Of course. No, but that's attraction.
Right,
it's like,
right. But no one is perfect. So therefore, no one's a 10 out of 10.
We're judging people based on the first picture we see of them, whether it's on Facebook or it's on a dating app.
I'm talking about everything, like to me, okay? But when you have guys out there swiping on every single profile, that's helping create some of that inflated ego and sense of self.
For sure it does. So it's, again, no victim mentality. It's like both contribute to it.
Absolutely.
So, but here's what that's created though. Now you have 80% of women that only want to date 20% of men because they want men to be certain things. They want them to be a certain height.
Yep.
Right? They want them to have a certain job, a certain amount of money. Right? Which also, if you look at the statistics, it's like, what should a desirable man be? What amount of money should he have to have? And, a man making $80,000 a year, and keep in mind, it gets harder every year because especially if he has kids too, he's divorced or whatever, that takes away from that.
And 80 grand in Toronto is not much.
No, but I'm saying depending where you live, and you see certain houses in the US, like, for what you'd pay for in Toronto, you could own 3 houses.
Yeah.
But, but the thing is, statistically, it's like what they're looking for is like 2 to 5% of men. And you have all these women looking for it. So that's the biggest issue right now. It's like you have like anywhere from 60 to 80% of men that are really left out of the dating pool because these women won't even if the men swiped onto them, they're going to look at them and not even look back. Or if they don't present themselves, keep in mind marketing, men aren't as good as marketing as women. So if these men aren't putting on a good picture, that's more of an issue. Keep in mind, when I was on dating apps, I had a broken phone, so I was just putting on older pictures, and I never took newer pictures or anything like that. Sometimes I was wearing a hat. I was told later on, in certain situations, like I didn't want to go at you at first because I couldn't see what you looked like. I couldn't see if you had a full head of hair, which I do, even though I like to wear a hat all the time. But certain things like that. So, and that would knock them out too, just because they're not marketing themselves properly. But that's a huge issue, number one, okay? Number two is what they call the dating app gap, okay? So here's specific numbers on that, okay? 67%, and this is another Pew Research study, okay? And this is 2023. 67% of online dating service users in the United States were men.
Really?
So online dating, this is why most men say, I'm getting off these, they do nothing for me.
Wow. Okay.
So that's another reason why men aren't dating anymore, because they can't find them online, which everyone else is using.
It's already 2 to 1.
They can't meet them in person,
Yep.
right? Even though you and I have found ways to meet people in person, but people just don't have that skill for how to do that anymore. Only 33% were women, okay? Men are more likely to use the apps, as I just said, okay? So the numbers are definitely not in men's favor. And keep in mind, I mean, women are dating multiple men at once too, so it makes it harder. Like, do you want to be the 10th guy that she's dating at the same time, right? And a discerning man, right, who works hard, is a good man, doesn't want to do that.
But it goes back to, pardon me, when you talk about what people are looking for,
Yeah.
and we touched upon it a little bit when Bev was on
Yeah.
the show. And when you are qualifying or looking for individuals based on numbers, essentially, right? So much money, so tall, so this, so that. Are you
You're
really
kind of
looking?
choosing them for the wrong reasons.
Are you really looking for a partner, or are you looking for someone who's going to take care of you, or are you looking for a trophy guy, or are you looking for?
No, that was my favorite episode. You two were just spitfiring back and forth all the qualities you should be looking for in someone, not just a transaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what it goes back to. So are people really looking for a relationship? Or are they looking for transactional situations?
I mean, again, if you are having a lot of interest from the opposite sex, you are going to try and get the best deal that you can. If that's the
Yeah.
way you look at it, you're not really looking for love. You're looking for security. And keep in mind, the older you and I get, the more women that we are looking to date, the mindset of a woman changes as she gets older. Again, a study. And they are looking more for security than for love. Okay.
I'm curious though as well.
But that's not the case for what we're talking about here.
But I'm also curious if women become pickier and
More discerning. We use the word discerning
okay.
because they've gone through certain things.
Well, I
And
was going to
obviously,
say,
yeah.
but I see the messages again. I've got 3 different female friends who send me the messages I get from guys.
Look, again, there's a ton
And
of
I'm
pigs out there. We know that.
I'm like, what the fuck? Like, you actually think that's going to get you somewhere? So when that happens, that's also going to impact opportunities for
But keep in
average
mind,
guy.
thank God those are discerning women, but there are a lot of women that, again, if they found the 1%, 2%, these 1%, 2% of guys are basically abusing that power because a lot of women want to date them. They will go out with them and it's like use and abuse that power, right? And it keeps a lot of these women out of the dating pool because they're dating 10, 15, 20 women at once.
Yep.
So it makes it very interesting for the younger
right.
men.
And that's great if you have all, if we're talking about older men, if you got all the coin to do that. But then again, is that really a relationship built on
No,
the
because
values you're
it
looking for?
changes them too, and it changes their values, and it changes the values of people. So it's changing the values of our society as this
Absolutely.
is happening. So it's just interesting to watch.
Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, we've already talked about men no longer wanting to approach women. Let's talk about a couple last few unofficial reasons why men, again, don't want to necessarily date or even try to date.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna say that, but that thing about men not wanting to approach, I don't know. It's like,
Yeah, but you're
again,
different. You're outgoing. I mean, you're
okay, but there's ways of approaching. If you go up and you're a pig, then you should be worried. But if you go up and you're decent and someone's not interested, take the hint and walk off. It's not a big deal. It's not a personal attack on you.
No. No,
right?
But again, we had an episode on not reading the cues properly, and men are clueless at that. So if they think they're clueless at that and they think it's going to get them in trouble, they will not approach.
Okay, but if you're dumb enough to go up and be like, "Hey, you're looking hot, want to fuck?" Then yeah, you know what? That's on you.
Yeah,
You're an
it's a
idiot.
little direct, right?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
But it's still bad enough to walk up and just be staring at not her eyes, right?
I agree,
like,
but you know what? How hard is it?
She's looking at your shoes. You're looking at something else. Neither one of you is making eye contact.
Oh,
yeah.
But you know what? Small talk, again, it goes back to the fear of things in practice. Someone's at a bar. Hey, how you doing? How's your night going? What are you drinking?
Yeah.
The worst that happens is like, you know what? They pick up the glass and they walk off. There's your cue. Leave them alone. Yeah. But if they're like, hey, you know what? My night's okay. I'm drinking this. What are you ordering?
They strike up a conversation with you, but also know when there's a lull in the conversation when she's, as you said before, staring away from you and just walk away.
Yep.
I agree.
Yep.
I agree. Okay. So a couple last few points. Okay. I have unofficial reasons. One thing that I was brought up by another, and this is a woman's site, it said a lot of reasons why men don't want to date anymore is because of the high body counts. And there's actually statistics that says that the higher a woman's body count before marriage actually increases her chances of divorce. Anything over 5.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting point. The high divorce rate alone would keep most men out of seeking long-term relationships.
Yep.
Right. Even sharing once your common law too, like you break up.
I talked about that when I was younger.
You don't get to keep the dog anymore, right?
No,
Yeah.
I talked about that when I was younger. That was one of my biggest concerns.
Yeah. Well, you see that online all the time.
Things,
I've been on sites where it's like divorced men will talk about like how much their lives changed after they got divorced. So, I mean, that's a different perspective. And I'm sure like women have their own perspective of it too. But even when you're watching both sides, it's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Modern feminism. Okay, we quoted this when we talked about
Mm-hmm.
chivalry. There is a certain generation of women, I think it was between 25 to like 45 or something, where it says they have been raised to view men differently and almost put them down. Right. So that was a stat that we quoted when we were doing
Yep.
chivalry. So that's an issue too.
Yep.
Again, not all women, I just said,
No.
right?
And again, it's, I know.
And I'm not saying stuff like this doesn't happen in
Oh,
reverse too. Like,
absolutely, yeah. And I mean, I know, again, I know all kinds of women who they they they're far from that whole feminist approach. They're
yeah,
in their feminine energy,
yeah.
but doesn't make them a feminist. And they
Oh, but it's
they want the
modern
good.
feminism too,
Yeah,
which kind of, in some ways have gone away from what original the feminism
feminine
was,
was,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. So but it's, again, it's interesting to see that.
yeah.
The last one obviously was the ease of finding new partners for men, especially through dating apps, said, but also on social media. So we go back to the very beginning again. Of all these women thinking it's so easy for men to find women, it's easy for a small group of
And
men to
then,
find women.
yeah.
Um, it is a lot more work for men to date than it is for women. That is well known, right? So, I mean, it's interesting, and it'll be interesting what the future holds. But you have a generation now that probably won't own houses, won't own cars, right? Will be living with a group of their friends. That will be their social interaction. They will still hook up with each other because that will be the need that they have. But the need for marriage, relationships may disappear in time.
And even the hooking up might not happen to the same extent because again, if women are still there's one of two
It'll be like
things. Either,
Demolition Man when they just like hook up their brains. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's the type of thing where either a lot of those women, once they've gotten their, you know, the schooling is done, they got their career
Yeah.
underway, they want to find that person
Yeah.
now. And these guys don't have the social skills to be able to carry that off.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be interesting, but yeah, I don't think this is kind of just a passing thing. I think we're going to see more of this trend happening. I
No,
could
I
be
think
wrong,
I
but I
think
definitely think
I
we're going to see
think
more
it's
of this.
big changes for society. And I mean, look, we knew this was happening over time,
Yeah.
right? It's like every generation things seem to speed up faster and faster and faster, and changes happen faster.
And you talked about as well high divorce rates, and you wonder how much that plays a role in both people's
Well,
minds.
yeah, but no, but that again,
Probably more so.
most
I'm thinking more
divorces are
so.
initiated by women,
Yep.
70%. They say that the courts have a monetary
Oh, absolutely.
incentive for women to
Well,
get
I was just going
divorced
to say,
and
but in
not
both
stick it
people's
out in a
minds, but
marriage,
for a guy, absolutely, because you're
right?
thinking that, and it's like,
It even said,
fuck.
yeah, but also
Yeah.
even said that a lot of women regretted it afterwards. It
Yeah.
was an emotional response. And, they wish they could go back, but they weren't ego. You wouldn't allow them to go back in that situation. Or he'd just given up on her and they had moved on,
Well,
right?
especially if it's acrimonious, why after that? Is there any way of reconciling or any way of
Yeah.
finding any
But we talked
positive
about the
ground?
high financial costs. The first one on my list here, which is that's a big reason why men don't even want to
Or
date.
but even the high financial cost of going out on dates where again, if it's someone who's grounded and they
Not if you go
recognize
on the soup date.
yeah. But it was like I think I talked about, a few episodes back,
Mhm.
one who was expecting like some royal treatment, like some high-end restaurant on a first date. And when, the options I gave weren't good enough, I
Mhm.
was like, are you kidding me?
Well, no, but if dating changes where if a woman's dating 10 people at once, then a man should be dating 10 people at once. You got to assume if you're not one-on-one and you two are going to just be exclusive for that period of time, no man is going to spend that amount of money on you. But the fact that he's dating 10 people at once is still more expensive than dating one
Oh,
person at a time.
hell yeah.
So,
And again, it's the type of thing when I'm with someone, I enjoy doing nice things. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, let's go out to a nice, like I'm happy to do that, but fuck no, I'm not doing that in a first
not on a
date.
first date, no.
And if that's what you're looking for, then go to that 1 or 2% of the population. Good luck to you, but get the fuck out of my life. And I
Yeah.
say that very bluntly because it's disgusting.
Go check our short video out on the coffee date. I think that's good enough for today. Al, thank you. It's a great topic you brought up.
Actually, I think it was the topic you brought up.
No, I think I made the main points, but you're the one who decided to do it on young men. I just want to talk
Oh,
about men in
specifically,
general.
yeah.
Being an older man, I wanted to talk about me again, but you were very smart to do it from this point of view. I hope we helped someone out there.
I like to think we do.
Yeah.
And again, it's the type of thing. Hopefully, people who are out there watching, it's from different demographics, different age groups, and everything else. But I would love to hear the take from the younger viewers and what your take is on dating in this day and age. Again, we love to hear your stories, your input, your feedback. It can be anonymous, use some scream name, some profile name. But yeah, we love that type of stuff.
Yeah, if you're a young woman, by all means, go find Al on social media and inflate his ego. All right, everyone. Thank you very much from the Kings of Chaos podcast. Have a great night, day, whatever.
Until next time, it's Adam. I'm Al. Don't forget, follow, review, rate, support.